Welcome back to the Talking Archive. I'm Josh Jacobs. Follow us right now on Instagram at JoshDJ57. That's JoshDJ5 and 7. JoshDJ57. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't done so already. And our conversation with Jody Eldred continues. And you also got to work some other shows as well. You got to work on JAG as well as NCIS. Tell us the work you did on those two shows, because you did quite a few of those episodes.
I did, yeah. I worked 14 or 15 years on both of those shows combined, and I was what we call a day player. I wasn't on. Well, I worked on almost every single episode, but I wasn't there every single day. So they did a lot of specialty stuff, like in both of those shows, JAG and NCIS and NCIS LA, for that matter. They would have, scenes where there's a television reporter and there's, a TV cameraman, and I would actually be the TV cameraman on camera. I mean, they would be filming me shooting an actor who's acting as a reporter, right? Mm-hmm. So, but I would actually be shooting as well. So I wouldn't just have a prop camera. I'd actually have my camera. And so I would literally be shooting that, and then they would be filming the scene of, here's a reporter and a cameraman out in the field. So I did tons and tons of that, and then they would use my footage, the actual video footage of the camera, of the reporter. So I did that, and we did things like hidden camera, surveillance cameras, night vision, like an 80 SEAL platoon attacking a chemical weapons compound at night. And because I had been to war, I covered the Iraq War in 2003 for ABC, and I had used night vision gear. I had some knowledge of this. So they would bring me in, and I knew how to make it look real because I'd really done that. And so I would shoot those kinds of things to make them look realistic, and they didn't have to go find some specialist in night vision and say, oh, he's done this and done it for real and in a real war. So I was able to use the skills that I had as a news guy and as a documentary maker to do that. And then I was in quite a number of episodes, probably a couple of dozen, just as a cameraman, just on camera. I actually, they had a speaking role for a cameraman, and they asked if I wanted to audition for that, and I had never acted before, and it was pretty apparent when I get in there. I'm like, okay, well, first off, I would not ever say these kinds of words. This is how we would actually say it, and that's not something you ever want to say during an audition. To the writer and executive producers and directors, all of whom I knew, by the way. Everybody in the room I knew, including the casting director. But I was like, I'm naive, and plus I didn't really care all that much. Like, I don't get this job. There were other actors, a couple of whom I knew that were out there, and were like, what are you doing here? I'm like, well, I'm auditioning for this role as a cameraman because that's what I do for a living. And I'm kind of glad actually that one of them got it, because they needed that job and that money more than I did. But acting was not my thing. Although I have acted twice since, and really enjoyed it. And minor stuff, but it's like, who knows? It's that comfort level that I have in front of the camera that I was so terrified of earlier. So I'm certainly open to that. And it's not like, I think was it Alec Guinness, or I can't remember who it was who said this, or Laurence Olivier said, there's only 3 reasons that anyone becomes an actor. Look at me, look at me, look at me. And I think that's really not in my wheelhouse. It's just something that I enjoyed.
Well, I remember I found in an old interview I did with Gary Owens about 25 years ago. He was generous enough to give me an interview for a communications paper that I was writing for my college. And he even, and Gary's one of the nicest people I've ever met. Well, but even he said, you do have to have some kind of an ego to be in radio.
That's true. And also help to have his voice.
Yeah, exactly. That would be, I was just like, I miss the guy, definitely. I mean, but he's right about that. I mean, you have to have a little bit, because if you don't, I just don't think you can really be a performer. And sadly, there's a lot of people who are extraordinarily insecure, that it's all about being seen and being known and being liked. That famous Sally Fields line when she won the Oscar, you like me, you really like me. I think that was really honest. And that's because, actors and musicians, for that matter, too, face so much rejection.
it's just constant. And I would never wish any of my friends or kids or grandkids to go into either one of those fields, because you could be extraordinarily talented. And I say this as a director who had to cast people and had to turn down other people for roles who I really wish I could have given them the job, but they just weren't quite right for it. It wasn't they weren't the most talented person in the room or gave the best performance, but maybe their look or their manner or their accent or voice was not quite what we needed for that character. And it's a brutal business, and maybe that person really needed that job. Maybe, I don't know. But you have to really have very, very thick skin. And there's a lot of really insecure and damaged and hurting people in Hollywood who are just getting constant rejection. And it's not because they don't try hard or because they're not good. It's just because they just hadn't found that thing that they were just right for. And it's painful.
Oh, yeah. And then sometimes there's several who are so good, it's really difficult for the casting director to be able to figure out, okay, who do we cast, because they were all just so good. And I just, who do we do? Who do we, cast?
Yeah, it's really painful, and I do not like that part of it. I mean, if there's somebody who's a standout, like slam dunk, easy choice, it's this person. But when it's others, it's just, I just feel kind of sorry for everybody and wish I could hire them all, but that's not the reality of it.
That's true. And you said you acted in several things. What were those two projects you'd mentioned? Are we not allowed to say quite yet?
No, but it's kind of hilarious. I mean, I've been an extra in a couple of things because they needed somebody. There was this movie when I first moved here. It was a dance picture called Girls Just Want to Have Fun with, who's that woman from Sex and the City? Sarah Jessica
Parker,
and Shannon Doherty was in it, and I was just playing the music for the dance sequences. It was kind of a teenage, college age dance thing, pretty wholesome as I recall. And but they had the scene where there was a studio cameraman, because they were shooting this live thing. In fact, there was a famous British DJ here in LA named David. You would know the guy. He was on like KLOS or one of the rock stations back in the 80s.
Well, there was Richard Blade.
You would know him.
Was it Richard Blade?
Richard Blade, that's who it was. Richard Blade.
I got to meet him about 8 years ago at the Culture Club concert. Very nice man.
Yeah, really good guy. So he was like this, this jockey guy in the set. So anyway, I played also a cameraman in there, and I was in a few scenes just like pushing a camera by. When you've done nothing, people are like, look, it's Jody, he's in a movie. Yeah, 3 seconds. But a few years ago, this is just one of these bizarre stories. I have some friends who I've known for probably 35 years. It's a couple, they're Christians, and she was an actor, and she was like one of the Snow White princesses at Disneyland, and she's a professional wig maker and all this kind of stuff, and her husband's a director and a cinematographer, and very talented couple I've known forever. And they were actually shooting, and she was helping produce a very low-budget family comedy movie that was shooting in Memphis. And they needed an actor to play Nikola Tesla. And it was a time travel movie. So it's like Tesla travels to, modern day. But there are some scenes that happened back in the early 1900s with him. And Tesla had a very unique look, if you've ever seen pictures of him. He had this kind of big mustache and kind of a bouffant kind of hairdo that was popular back then, I guess. And so these are good friends of mine, and we mess with each other all the time. I mean, we have very similar sarcastic senses of humor. So she posts on Facebook, hey, we're doing this movie, and we're desperately trying to find somebody to play Tesla. And so I post immediately on there, pretty sure I'm not your guy. And, knowing, and then I had several friends who said, oh, yeah, Jody's definitely your guy. They're just totally messing with them. And so I expect her to go, thank you guys so much. Thank you for your help. We really seriously need someone. Thank you for all the snarky remarks. But no, she contacts me and says, you would be perfect for this. And I'm like, well, you're completely out of your mind. And number one, I look nothing like Nikola Tesla. And number two, I'm not an actor. So there's that. And she says, no, you would be great at this. You can ad-lib. And I said, no, you're out of your mind. She goes, no, we know you. You could totally do this. You do. You're funny. It's a funny role. Blah blah blah. And they're like almost begging. It's like, we desperately need someone. I'm like, look, he's from Eastern Europe or somewhere, I can't remember. And I'd been to Bulgaria a couple of times filming, and I have a really good friend who's Bulgarian, so I can do this fake Bulgarian accent. And anybody from Bulgaria would go, no, that's like a really bad Ukrainian accent at best. But people don't know. It was Slavic or something, I don't know. So they're like begging me, would you do, we told the director, who's an older guy, and I'll tell you who it was, it's Randall Cherry from Operation Rescue. It was just getting more bizarre. And they're like, he's doing this movie. I'm like, oh my gosh. And he really, really wants to do a Zoom audition with you. And I'm like, you guys are out of your mind, but of course I will do it as a favor. So we do the Zoom thing, and they sent me the sides, the little pages of script, and I'm reading them, and I'm putting on this completely fake accent. I'm just being a complete goofball with it. And they call me the next day and they say, you're hired. I'm like, what are you, nuts? Did you not audition anyone else but me? She goes, oh, we auditioned several, and your Nikola Tesla was just precious. And I told my wife that, and she's like, I think that's the first time that word has ever been used to describe you.
Now I'm thinking about, Dick Van Dyke as Bert in Mary Poppins. Mary Poppins, you're like beautiful. I guess, maybe you're challenging. Maybe they were inspired by Dick Van Dyke's performance.
It could have been. It was hilarious. So I out of Memphis, and they shave my beard and do this crazy hairdo thing, and so I put on this completely ridiculous fake accent, and it was weird because I what I was nervous about was that I wasn't going to be able to remember the lines, and I would totally screw things up. And I told them, I said, guys, like, I don't care about me. I don't want to be an actor. I don't give a rip about that. I really don't. But I just don't want to screw this up for you guys and have to do multiple takes, and now you're spending all this time, and I told you I wasn't good at this, So, but I somehow was able to remember all these lines, and they were changing it all the time. We're there on the day, and I'm ready to go, and they're like, oh, no. We're doing scene 73 and 78 today. I'm like, I spent 3 hours last night trying to memorize these lines. I have no idea. So, but anyway, for whatever reason, it turned out okay. And I had people coming up to me saying, so of all the movies and these you've been in, what's been your favorite role? And I'm like, I've never done anything before. It's the first thing I've ever done. And they're like, what? You were just so good at that. They said, you were so confident. And I was telling my wife about this, and I said, it wasn't that I was confident, it's just that I didn't care. It was complete. I guess those things can look similar to each other, but it's like, I didn't care. I mean, I wanted to do good for them. I wasn't confident, just like, no, I just didn't care. It's like jumping off a high diving board. Aren't you afraid? No, I just don't care. Well, apparently that came across as being, very, confident or something. It was hilarious. I mean, it turned out good. They still hadn't cut it. I haven't seen it, but it was a lot of fun. And then we had this short film at Biola that we did that I wrote for my students to light and shoot, and they couldn't find somebody to play this older character in it. They just couldn't find anybody. And it's like, I'll do it. And I had written it, and it's a character that easily could have been me anyway. So it was super easy. And somebody later, one of the students' boyfriend saw the film, and he said, that guy, that older guy in there, I don't know who that was, but he's really good. My student told me this, and it was, again, another case of I just don't care. It wasn't being confident. I just didn't really give a rip. So I don't know what that's about, but that's my acting stories.
To quote the Phil Collins song, I don't care anymore.
Exactly. That was kind of it. Now, if somebody saw one of those things and wanted to hire me, I think it would be a whole different thing, because I'd be like, okay, now I really want to do good for them. But the good thing is I really don't care about being an actor. I really don't. So I don't think I have to worry about that.
Now, you also did a project called Changed Lives, Miracles of the Passion. What inspired you to do that film? Was it Mel Gibson's The Passion of the Christ? Yeah,
it was. I'll tell you how this happened. Steve McAvity, who was executive producer, Steve produced a number of pictures for Mel Gibson. And I think including like Braveheart and We Were Soldiers, and I'm not sure, but they had done a lot of stuff together. Steve was speaking. The movie hadn't come out yet, and he was speaking at a men's prayer gathering or something at Bel Air Pres, and a friend of mine invited me to go. And Steve's a Catholic, and he began talking about these really strange supernatural occurrences that were happening during the filming, which a lot of people have heard about now. You know, Jim Caviezel being struck by lightning, one of the PAs on the film being struck by lightning twice, a woman whose child was healed of epilepsy. I mean, there were just a number of these really very unusual things going on, and you could tell Steve was having a hard time wrapping his mind and brain around this. And so I was sitting there and I thought, man, if there are miracles happening while they're shooting The Passion of the Christ, I got a feeling this movie may really impact people in miraculous ways. I mean, this is unusual. So I took a little piece of paper out of the pew in front of me, and I wrote on there, Doc about miracles. And I showed it to my buddy sitting next to me, who's a screenwriter. And I showed that to him, and he just looked at me and nodded. And it was like at that instant, God had given me this idea. And so when it was over, I went up to Steve and introduced myself, and I said, I feel like, I don't want to sound like super spiritual or anything here, but I feel like God has put this idea that if there are these miracles happening on the set, I think there might be miracles that happen when people see this thing. I mean, God is clearly doing something here very unusual. And he didn't disagree and said, well, why don't you come down to our office? They were in Santa Monica, and I was living in Marina Del Rey at the time, so it was close by. And he goes, why don't you come by and let's talk about it? I'll introduce you to Mel. And so I did, and so we talked about this, and before that very night, there was they were doing screenings of The Passion of the Christ for ministry leaders and all kind of other people, and I got invited to see it. So I saw it, I was like, oh my goodness. And it wasn't totally done, they still had some visual effects stuff to do, but it was, 99% there. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. This is going to impact on people's lives, no question. So then later that week, I went down and met with Steve and met with Mel and told them my idea. And they were like, okay, we think that's fine, but we're not going to be a part of it because we don't want to come across as being self-serving. And I'm like, what do you mean self-serving? I mean, this would be like a promotional thing for your movie, like come see the movie. People are going to be touched by miracles. And like, yeah, well, you go ahead and do it. And so I did. And I had to take out a second mortgage on my house to raise the funds to do it. And the movie hadn't even come out yet. And so this was kind of one of those things where God says, do this. And you better do it. When he says that, you better go do it. And so I put together a team, and I had a couple of producers, one of whom had been a network news producer, and I said, look, I believe miracles are going to be happening to people when they see this movie, and we need to find out about them. And we need to vet them. We need to make sure these are for real, and we're not going to exaggerate anything. It either happens or it doesn't. And so the movie comes out, and we had a website where people can go to and talk about how it impacted them. And sure enough, we start getting reports from all over the world about incredible things that are happening to people since they saw the movie. And so we start narrowing it down, and so we dispatch our crews out, and we got 7 or 8 stories. I can't remember exactly how many. And, they were all in the realm of the miraculous. There's no doubt about it. There was one story of a little girl who was maybe 2 or something, and she was in the bathtub taking a bath, and her parents had just seen the movie the day before. And somehow the drain got plugged. They had the shower on, and the drain got plugged up, and they weren't in there for a few minutes. They were doing something else, and they come back in, and there she is face down blue in the water. And they get her out, and they don't know how to do CPR, and they're on the 911 call, which we have a recording of. And the dad said, we had just seen the movie the night before, and they have the verse in there that says, by his stripes we're healed. And we just began praying for her. Sorry. I can never tell the story without getting choked up.
That's right.
And you can hear it in the 911 call. God heal her, God heal her, God help us, God help us. And they just said, by your stripes she is healed, by your stripes she is healed. And the paramedics show up, and we interviewed the paramedics, we interviewed the sheriff, and they said she was dead. We have seen dead children before. This was a dead child. No pulse, no color. She was turning cold. She was gone, and we were not able to revive her. And so they take her to the hospital, and we interviewed doctors and everybody, and they said, yep, dead child. But they began resuscitation efforts, and they had continued them apparently in the ambulance along the way, and they're still, she had coded there. She was not there. She came back to life. This kind of thing doesn't happen. They had never seen anything like that before. And I actually got to meet her a couple of years later. I was on 700 Club, I guess. Pat Robertson interviewed me, and he had the family there. They brought them in. They did a thing on my documentary. And it was my first chance to meet them because I had a crew that filmed this in Colorado. And so I got to meet this little girl. I was like, here's this miracle girl right here. And now she's 23 or something. I'd love to see her. Mm-hmm. But there were plenty of stories of these real-life miracles that happened. And it was really something else. And so when I was done with the picture, it was going to air on Easter, just like a few weeks, I think, can't remember how long the movie had come out, a month and a half. I mean, it wasn't very long at all. We had to work super fast. And thankfully, because I had worked in news for so long and had a crew that had worked in news, we were able to work really fast. And so I had licensed some footage from the movie, from The Passion of Christ, to be in the picture. And I had to get approval from Mel Gibson and Steve McAveety for that. So I sent them a copy of the film, and then one afternoon they called. And so it's Steve and Mel Gibson on the phone, which was kind of cool. And just for some regular guy, get a phone call from Mel Gibson. And so we talked for a long time, about a half hour, and they were really touched by it and really liked it. And I could tell Mel he didn't quite know what to think about this whole spiritual warfare thing. It was new to him, strong Catholic, Latin Mass, Vatican I kind of guy. And so he asked me, he goes, how many stories are there out there like this that you know about? And I can't even remember the number now, but it was something like 10,000. I mean, it was an insanely high number of people who had responded to our website and some others with stories of the miraculous that had happened. And I went down to the office later that evening, and I had to sign some papers, and Mel was there. And he was about to leave, and it was just me and him and like one other person just kind of hanging around. And so we chatted for a little. I'd met him before, and chatted for a little, and I knew a lot of the struggles and supernatural challenges that he had gone through making the movie, and I had gone through a lot of very similar stuff. Like every day there was some new crazy spiritual warfare thing that was going on. I mean, it got to where it was laughable. Like, okay, what's it going to be today, And so I was telling Mel about that as he was getting on the elevator to head down, and we just stood there and chatted, and I told him that story, and he just looked at me very soberly right in the eyes, and he goes, "You too, huh?" Like, yeah. And you could just tell he was like, there's something going on here.
This is the Talking Archive. I'm Josh Jacobs. We're in conversation with Jody Eldred, filmmaker, and next time we'll discuss the controversies that arose during the making of The Passion of the Christ, plus the film that I was an extra in that I thought nobody saw me in, but turns out I was in, plus the film that Jody got to be an extra in and was also recognized. I'm telling you, girls just want to have fun, and that was one of the films. Which one of us was in that film, we'll find out next time.